history and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition. So grateful that you can join us. And we have in studio with us today Liberty McArtor, who is the host of Point of View, as well as the Know Why podcast. Jeff Mateer, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer for First Liberty Institute. Going to talk about the Ten Commandments, some Ten Commandments cases, the arrest of a church protest leader and what that might mean in the future. Certainly a number of other very important topics that we will get into as well. But I think I'd be remiss if I did not mention that some of us are paying attention to weather. And I'll hold up this chart for those of you that are watching online. More than half the United States threatened with ice, snow, and cold in massive winter storms. Now, Liberty, oftentimes when we talk about weather here in Dallas, I have to apologize to our radio stations in Alaska or Minnesota or Minneapolis, Michigan, even Illinois. But I saw the other day, even some of the schools were closed down today in some of the Midwest. So this is going to be, I think, a significant issue. And I think after we are finished here, I suspect all three of us are going to want to hunker down.
I think so. You know, we're ready. We managed to get our groceries. My husband fought the good fight at Walmart. So we're all stocked up on what we might need. But yeah, I hope everybody who's listening can stay warm, maybe get a cup of tea, get a blanket, and just kind of enjoy a cold weekend maybe.
Jeff, you're from Pennsylvania. You came in with a parka, though. You're ready.
You are ready. Well, one thing, having lived in Texas 39 years, I mean, it can be 70 in the morning and then 32, and by the time we leave the show today, so I'm
have a closet in your back seat.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah. One of the other ones, I love this line here, a storm coming to Washington, D.C., and he said, well, I'm not necessarily talking about the storm, although the weather storm is one. He's talking about when the Supreme Court rules on tariffs with Donald Trump, because his argument is if they support Donald Trump, then Katie bar the door, and if he goes against the court or goes against Trump's, well, we're going to hear a lot about that. So there will be a lot of issues we will discuss over the next 2 hours. If you'd like to join us a little bit later, we'll certainly open up the phones and give you a chance to have that discussion. But if you were listening last week, Jeff did mention that Kelly Shackelford, who oftentimes is sitting in that chair, was not here. He was over in Fort Worth, and he was with a couple of individuals that we've interviewed before, Tim O'Hare and a variety of others that were unveiling a Ten Commandments monument, and that's our first article. Meanwhile, we also had a case before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals because both Texas and Louisiana have laws mandating the posting of Ten Commandments. So I think for a few minutes, Jeff, you need to give us some education on the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, so obviously a historical document, and all of us as believers realize that and the importance of it. And what our victory, First Liberty's victory in the Coach Kennedy case did was pave way now for the opportunity to, it's really take back ground, because for centuries the Ten Commandments were something that were, one, displayed in classrooms throughout the country, and two, were displayed in county courthouses, on the grounds of capitals, and in other public places. But because of a bad decision in the 1970s, and then the liberal Supreme Court enforcing that bad decision, really from 1970 until the 2020s, we no longer, the court had held that you couldn't post in Ten Commandments in classrooms, that these monuments and displays had to be removed from the public sphere. We believe, and we think the Supreme Court will eventually back us up on this, is that's no longer good law, and that there's nothing wrong with public displays of the Ten Commandments. That is central to our history and our tradition. And I was at the Supreme Court not too long ago, and was reminded in the Supreme Court building, so the very place where cases are argued, there's a display of lawgivers, and there's a display, and Moses is sent front and center with the Ten Commandments.
Yes.
and that, of course, at the U.S. Supreme Court every day, school children go on tours, and they, oh my word, we better put something over Moses. No, of course not. And so we're really proud. First, we're really proud of the folks in Tarrant County. So our good friend, I know who's been on the show, Matt Krause.
Yeah, Matt Krause was there too.
Who's of counsel at First Liberty. That I don't know which is his part-time gig. He's of counsel at First Liberty, but he's also a county commissioner in Tarrant County. And
that's right.
Matt's first act as a county commissioner was to author a proposal to put the Ten Commandments back. And he had the full support of another good friend and also been on the show, Judge Tim O'Hare. And so together, the Tarrant County commissioners authorized to receive as a gift. And so there was no taxpayer money spent. It was a gift to the county of this Ten Commandments display, and that was unveiled last Friday. And it's interesting. We had a little piece on that our social media team at First Liberty posted, and you used to work there, Liberty. Yep. So I'm going to tell you these numbers. It's just amazing. As of yesterday, and it's probably now higher, 1.9 million views.
Wow!
Of the unveiling of the Ten Commandments, and which just tells me, I mean, one, it's ridiculous that it was ever banned.
Yes,
but it also tells me it's something that we won. And so what we've been saying at First Liberty, and anybody listening, I'd encourage you. This can be done in your community. So we know that my home county, Rockwall County, their commissioner's court has also passed, and they're receiving a donation, and they're going to put up a Ten Commandments display. We believe the city of Amarillo is going to put up a Ten Commandments display. Galveston County has told us they're putting up a Ten Commandments display. Now, that's Texas, and I'd also believe there are communities throughout. We know Kentucky has put theirs back on the Capitol. Indiana wants to put their Ten Commandments back. And so I think there's a real movement. And you can say, well, does this really matter? Yes, it does matter. I mean, as people of the book, we know that memorials are important.
Yes.
God's word tells us getting fired up, aren't I?
Well, first of all, let me just say.
I got fired up last week. I told my wife I got a little too fired up. I said, I bet they don't think you got too fired up.
Let's give Liberty a chance.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, it's amazing. And it's interesting. I was actually just reading that part of the Bible where God is giving these laws, and it's so detailed. And sometimes, for Christians who read through the Bible frequently, you think, oh, here we go again. But I was actually amazed that the symbols really do matter. So from that Christian perspective, it really is representative of a deeper truth. And then in America, of course, that's our foundation. And so I think it's perfect that in, America 250, in this year, we're allowed to recognize our national heritage again.
Well, I need to take a break, but again, we've got a booklet coming out on the Declaration, and again, you will see that booklet talks about some very important relationships between the Ten Commandments, the preaching of the pastors of the 18th century of the Bible, and biblical concepts, which end up there as well. But some of you might say, well, what can I do in my home community? You can go to firstliberty.org, but you can also try this. RFIA, that stands for Restoring Faith in America. There is where they can actually give you some direction on maybe getting a Ten Commandments posted in your community. RFIA.org, firstliberty.org. We have more to talk about in terms of the Ten Commandments. We'll do that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Ed Price writes about global economics and recently wrote to explain a mystery. After World War II, we assumed that we would have a vibrant international economy. When the Cold War ended, there seemed even more likely. Globalization would lead to a peaceful world and a stable economy. Instead, he says, we are seeing the stuff of diplomatic nightmares, international tensions, and competing territorial claims. There's an arms race in the South China Sea. There is ground war in Europe. He asks, what explains this mystery? Well, in 1970, President Nixon was forced by economic circumstances to no longer peg the dollar to gold. Thus, the U.S. adopted a fiat dollar, and this country had an unlimited money supply. He talks about the inflation of the 1970s all the way to the 2008 financial crisis and fiat finance wars in the Middle East. He does credit President Trump with one instinctive argument. If Uncle Sam buys foreign goods with his credit card, he will slowly destroy his credit score, erode his manufacturing base, and presumably lose his ability to fight a major war. This assessment is correct. For the last 50 years, this country has issued and exported paper currency. He notes that the French famously complained that this was an exorbitant privilege, but they and other nations know that it's really a burden to owning and operating an international financial system. He explains that the current system is undermining America. Ed Price ends his essay with this observation: there is no murder mystery here. It was Mr. Fiat in the drawing room with the printing press. We've solved the mystery. Now it's time to solve the problem. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Talk about the Ten Commandments for just a few more minutes, and then we're going to talk about a church protest, which didn't anticipate that would be a conversation we would have last Friday. If I had told everybody around the table we're going to have to deal with people protesting in the church, we would have gone, I don't think so, and that's exactly what happened. So we'll get into that, and that's a very important issue as well. But again, Liberty McArtor as well as Jeff Mateer. And Jeff, let's talk about the fact that in addition to these 10 commandments going up in various places, you have the oral arguments before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which led to some interesting comments. So maybe you can pull out a few.
Yeah, so this is a challenge to both the Louisiana law and the Texas law, which in one case requires, in others it allows citizens to donate 10 commandments to be posted in classrooms in both Louisiana and Texas. And so this is the third hearing. So there was a hearing at the district court, and then there was a hearing in front of 3 judges. This was a hearing in front of the whole Fifth Circuit, all 17 judges.
Wow.
And which is an incredible experience, by the way. And citizens can go. You can go to New Orleans, just like you can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. But I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to get in to hear a hearing at the Fifth Circuit as opposed to the Supreme Court. But you can go and watch. But it's really an incredible thing because it's 17 judges who are sitting arrayed across. And so as an advocate, you've got to be on the swivel because they can ask you questions. And in listening to the argument, I mean, the questions started almost immediately. Mm-hmm. And so you've got Judge Jones, Edith Jones, who longtime member of the Fifth Circuit, and someone like our good friend Judge Jim Ho asking a lot of questions. And also another good friend, Kyle Duncan, used to be with Beckett, now is on the Fifth Circuit. So really interesting argument. Now, reading tea leaves, which is not good to read tea leaves, but it went well. It went really well.
I would think so.
Both the Solicitor General of Louisiana and the Solicitor General of Texas both did outstanding jobs. And it brought up some interesting questions that our opponents had to answer. And so you've got the 10 Commandments. You object to that. Why do you object to that? Well, because not everyone. That's endorsing one religion over another because, well, why? It uses the word God. Some people believe in gods. Some people don't believe any, but you said God. And then very craftily, the judges asked, well, what about Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail? And of course, which is appropriate because this argument was Tuesday, the day after Martin Luther King. Yeah. And what do we, I mean, so many places, and I know even my own, it's that is such an historic letter that is all about religious belief and all about God and about this guy named Jesus, heaven forbid. And so can you post that? And then of course then you get this. Can you post the Declaration of Independence, which has references to God? So very, very, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be. I think we're going to get a good result, which is great. If not, then there is to the Supreme Court. But again, even the opponents were sort of arguing the old law because they were talking about things like this will endorse religion. Well, Well, no. That's not the test. The Kennedy case makes it very clear. We're going to look at things through the lens of history and tradition. Well, what's more historical and tradition than the Ten Commandments, which in years, for decades, were posted in classrooms throughout America?
And again, if you've ever been in a high school class where they divide you up and you have to debate an issue, sometimes you get one where you're saying, oh, this is really going to be tough. Or in law school, same thing, moot court and things like that. I would hate to be on the other side and argue against the Ten Commandments, which is the historical document, not only of the United States, but of Western culture. It's in the Supreme Court. It is something that has been part of the American tradition, liberty, for 2 centuries. And only after you had, of course, Engel versus Vitale and a variety of others, of course, the Lemon Test, and then eventually Stone versus Graham and some of those. I've done a little study on this.
Yeah, you've got it.
These were then thrown out. But if you look at it historically, it's only been your generation that has lived and actually gone to a school that didn't have the Ten Commandments in it.
Yeah. And, for people who are thinking through this, anybody who studies the Founding Fathers is going to see very clearly that they were influenced by Christian thought. So maybe they weren't all Bible-believing Christians. Obviously, you've talked about that on the show, Kerby. But many of them were. But that was the biblical worldview informed their thoughts and informed the founding of this country. And that does not mean that everybody in the country has to be a Christian or believe in the Bible. But we have a right to acknowledge the heritage that gave us the founding of our country. And a lot of people don't think about either the fact that secular humanism is actually a religion in and of itself. And so they say that they're being religiously neutral or trying to be in public education. But if you are constantly saying that you can't mention God, something that a majority of Americans still believe in, but you can promote Darwinism, which is a religion unto itself, then you really have a lot of inconsistency there.
You've been writing about this myth of neutrality and the indispensable supports and things of that nature. So be reading some of the appeal letters coming out, because you'll see some of that coming out as well. But this, again, is, I think, fairly easy. I would assume the opponents will, again, appeal this, and then maybe it goes to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it would go, although I don't know if the court, if the Fifth Circuit, what I think the Fifth Circuit will do, again, they've got, our side, in order to uphold the law, you've got to get 9 of the 17 judges supporting you.
I think you have those.
Which I think is there,
yeah.
Based upon the questioning. And then the other side will appeal, will seek review by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court does not have to review it. My prediction would be if they will not review it. Because you need 4 judges to say to review a case. If they got it right, then why review it? And so I don't think now another case could come out of the Ninth Circuit where it rules the wrong way, which the Ninth Circuit does about 70% of the time, and it could go up. But I think this case will be for the good news is for Louisiana and Texas. This issue will be resolved. One of the arguments that the opponents to the law made in the district court was, and that the district court judge, a judge down in San Antonio, Fred Beery, accepted was, well, what if you're talking about posting it in all classrooms? Well, we have to protect the younger students because, if they see the word adultery, they're going to have questions. And of course, my response to this, good. We need to talk about morals, right?
Maybe don't give them access to YouTube in the classroom where they can look up whatever they want to.
Exactly. And we're now getting cases from teachers who are telling us in the elementary school level some of the things they're being asked to teach on gender and sexuality to first graders, for instance.
Yes.
But we can't talk about adultery, but we can talk about human sexuality and what your identity is. It's absolutely insane. So that's why we have a great court system. Fortunately, we live in a great state that understands the importance of that. I applaud our sister state, Louisiana, for doing the same. And, Georgia's looking at, just so the listeners can know, Georgia's looking at a Ten Commandments law in their schools. Kentucky is looking at it, theirs, Indiana. So there are probably more. That's just the few that come to mind. So people should be engaged because this is something, it's another opportunity for us to say, look, what's been going on for the past 40 years is wrong. This purging religion from our public life is absolutely wrong. We have an opportunity now to bring religion back in, to inform. And we shouldn't, especially as you mentioned, Liberty, which I think is very appropriate. I mean, this is the 250th anniversary. What better time to go back to the vision that our founders had?
Very good. Liberty, we put out, of course, you helped write the Pray for America. I'm thinking there's a Pray for America there because we need 9 justices there. Judges, I should say, in the Fifth Circuit. And then I don't know that it would go to the Supreme Court. 4 to take, 5 to win, but nevertheless, that's a possibility. So pray for the judges. Also pray for some of the states like Georgia. So, I mean, maybe there's a Pray for America in that. Speaking of that, that is something you can sign up for if you haven't on our website, pointofview.net. It's on the right-hand column, and you can subscribe, and it's something comes out once a week. But one of the other resources I thought I'd make available is this booklet, A Biblical Point of View on Gambling. Now, we did that just the other day because we had a Cal Thomas piece about sports gambling. And rumor has it we've got some major football games this weekend, and I suspect there'll be a lot of sports gambling. And there have been some real concerns people have. So this is where we took some things I've written in the past about gambling generally and then focused on this issue of sports gambling. Rich Lowry referred to it as America's gambling compulsion. Another one writing about gambling is dealing and affecting sports. And so I wanted to give you a kind of a counterpoint on that issue. And the bottom line is a lot of times people say, well, I'd like to get your booklet. Is there a way I can get it easily? And the answer is yes. Right now, that banner there gives you a chance to get a copy of the booklet on a biblical view of gambling. You click on the button that says Get More Information, and you can read it right there, or you can also download it if you would like to get it in PDF format. So sports gambling going to be a big issue this weekend, and there's quite a scandal unfolding right now. We'll be back right after this.
Who can you trust? Years ago, many of us could probably have provided a fairly long list, but today it seems we almost can't trust anyone. Educators don't even know what a woman is anymore. Many so-called public servants have shown all they care about is themselves. The FBI has been accused of bias, law-breaking, betrayal, and journalism. It's largely corrupt, with no Clark Kent standing up for truth, justice, and the American way. All of this is why Point of View Radio is more important than ever, and your part in supporting us is more needed than ever. Do your part today in supporting trustworthy truth. Stand with us and help push back the lies and the darkness. Visit pointofview.net. Don't put it off. Take a moment right now and click on that big blue button that says Donate Now. Or call to invest at 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again in studio with me, Jeff Mateer, Liberty McArtor, and one of our articles is about the fact that the FBI has arrested at least a left-wing activist, and I believe now some others, but we'll focus on this one activist in particular, Nekima Levy Armstrong, who is facing a FACE Act violation. I'll get into that in just a minute, as well as some are even saying maybe using the Ku Klux Klan Act, which is from the 19th century. But nevertheless, that is the case. But when we went off the air on Friday, if I had said, well, be careful what happens in your church because you might have a protester there, would not have expected that. I do remember some pro-homosexual activist in a church in New York City, but here, right there in a church in Minnesota, a group of individuals, protesters, come into City's Church, which is a Southern Baptist church, kind of between Minneapolis and St. Paul, but it has a St. Paul address. And that's because they were believing that one of the church pastors works for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I'll get into that in just a minute. And so in addition to that, you have the former CNN anchor Don Lemon videotaping all of it. And so the first thing I thought I would spend some time talking about, Jeff, is that we are hearing from the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, well, this is just free speech. No, you don't have First Amendment rights to interrupt a place of worship. You don't have the right to actually go into various meetings and interrupt them. And if you do, there are consequences and should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. And I asked someone this week, I mean, does Don Lemon, actually believe the things he's saying? Or is he just saying things just to kind of rile people up? But he truthfully can't believe that. I mean, he's not with CNN anymore. But just think if he were. So CNN's office is in Atlanta. Do we have a free speech right just to barge into their offices and say, "Oh, this is our free speech right. We want access"? Of course not. And that's not a church. That's just a business. No, it's private property. And yes, they invite people into their property, but when you invite a guest, and I've used this is my Steve Miller example again, so we get to our esteemed producer here. And so if I invite someone into my home, right, they're my guest, but I can revoke those privileges if they misbehave and ask them to leave. And if they don't leave, that's called trespassing.
Yes.
So if I invite you and Steve to my house tonight, and you, of course, would be a perfect gentleman. But let's say Steve is not a perfect gentleman, and he starts, doing whatever, speaking loudly. I can say, Steve, I appreciate you being here, but it's now time for you to go home. And if he refuses to go, I can call the police. Mm-hmm. This guy is uninvited. He's a trespasser. So it's the same thing. Now, a church even has more protection.
That's true.
And I think this is the brilliance. And I meant to look at this, but I think it was the Gingrich Republicans. Because 1994, that would have been Clinton, correct?
That is correct.
And in 1994, because of violence, and you'll remember this, there were a lot of violence. Well, a lot. There was violence outside abortion clinics.
Yeah.
And
Operation Rescue, and then some people
and they were
went further.
doing what
Right.
people felt like sometimes crossing the line. And so legislation was sponsored to protect abortion clinics. And the Republicans said, "Oh, that's great. Let's add churches to the same protection." And so the law, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, got amended to include places of religious worship. And so when Pam Bondi when the Attorney General talks about the FACE Act, that we call the FACE Act, that it also applies not just for abortion clinics, it applies to places of worship. And so it prohibits intentionally injuring, intimidating, or interfering with anyone seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of worship. And so when these, not only were they trespassers, they were violating a federal law, the FACE Act. So, and we have heard all this. No, there's no First Amendment right. And we don't have a First Amendment right to go into a private place, even if we're originally invited in. There's no saying. First Amendment rights are for public places. They're for the park. They're for the sidewalk. They're not in the middle of church disrupting it. So I think this. The other two, when you list I know you mentioned Miss Armstrong being the other two people who were arrested. I think one, this is interesting, a St. Paul school board member. A St. Paul school board, and the other one, which is my famous, DeWoke farmer. was arrested.
Oh, that one too.
DeWoke
Yes.
Farmer, Mr. William Kelly, who goes by DeWoke Farmer. We're part DeWoke Farmer.
That's
I mean,
up.
I don't know.
I know. Liberty, let's talk about this because you and I talked off the air. We have still posted this piece about the FACE Act Repeal Act of 2025, and we've been saying that the FACE Act has been misused sometimes against pro-lifers. Been a dozen different cases or more that I could find, and that we think eventually that would be something to repeal. But the bottom line, it's in the law right now. Of course, you also have, as I pointed out just a minute ago, back in the 19th century, the Ku Klux Klan Act. So, and of course, just disrupting of a public event. So there are just a lot of reasons why Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, can bring a lawsuit against and actually prosecute these individuals that stepped into the church.
Sure. And, I think the Repeal FACE Act that is before Congress and that our action alert is about really focuses on the fact that the Biden administration weaponized it against pro-lifers. And so that is a concern. But I like, to Jeff's point, yes, they did violate that federal law, and so it's still there. So it can be used. Yeah. But there still, even without it, is no First Amendment right to violate someone's freedom of religion to worship and trespass, all of that. And I think, I've seen protests against churches before when there have been scandals or controversies, and people maybe stand outside across the street on the sidewalk with signs. People do that all the time. But I also want to just mention kind of the messaging thing that confused me. What we're really seeing in Minnesota is a propaganda war between the administration and then the extreme protesters. And I just think, when arguably, maybe, especially on social media, some of the protesters were winning the propaganda war, like some of the things that come out until there's more information don't make the ICE agents look very flattering or cast them in a flattering light. Then go in and scare a bunch of peaceful people who are sitting in church, and you see pictures of, children crying and being comforted by their parents. And with all the violence, unfortunately, in our culture, you're sitting in church and a bunch of people barge in shouting. You don't know what's about to happen. Just think about how scary that is. And okay, this is the image that you're going to go with, for your protest. That part, I think, was not very wise. But again, not in line with the First Amendment either.
I also wonder if you did this in the state of Texas, since a good number of people in the state of Texas actually have concealed carry. If I saw a protest and some noise, I would see some guns drawn as well. These protests almost always happen in blue states because they recognize that if you decided to do this in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, just to mention a few of the southern states we've been talking about just a few minutes ago, I think it would go differently. And there would be probably a lot more pushing and shoving. But again, back to the key point, you don't have the right.
No, you don't. And we actually have another case, this one in California, and it's not over immigration, but a church there, it's because of their stance on Israel, and protesters interrupted a worship service. Yes. There, and we've brought a federal lawsuit again using. And I don't disagree with you guys about the FACE Act, but if it's an available tool, we're going to use it, and churches are protected. So we've brought that. The other use that we've done, and we successfully and worked with then Attorney General Ashley Moody, who's now a United States Senator for Florida, but when she was AG, and with Governor DeSantis to go after people who had harmed pregnancy resource centers.
Right.
And which also violates the FACE Act, because the FACE Act doesn't just apply to abortion clinics. It's anyone involved in so-called reproductive health, which pregnancy resource centers qualify under that definition. So there have been some positive, and I know Congressman Chip Roy is one of the ones kind of spearheading the effort to repeal the FACE Act, because you're absolutely right. The Biden administration completely misused that law, even to the text of the law, misused it going after pro-life people.
So again, you can both click on the action item to eventually call for its repeal, but you can also use it to prosecute those individuals that barge into a church. I want to open up the phones. I suspect some of you have some thoughts about this. We've been talking about the 10 Commandments, talk about the threat to churches. Are you at your church fearful of protesters coming in there? What have you done to protect yourself? We'll come back and take some calls and get to some other issues right after this.
Post-Roe v. Wade, abortion numbers have increased. Although some states prohibit it outright, chemical abortions take place in every state. Well before the justices handed down their 2022 Dobbs ruling freeing us from Roe's federal right to abortion, the Food and Drug Administration made abortion easier to obtain and more dangerous. Abortion drugs first became legal in the U.S. in 2000. That's the year the FDA approved the two-drug regimen to be used during the first 7 weeks of pregnancy. In 2016, the agency approved an extension, allowing chemical abortion up to 10 weeks gestation. The first drug in the two-step regimen, mifepristone, blocks the hormone progesterone, causing the baby's death. Mifepristone can have serious side effects, including hemorrhaging, immune system inhibition, and septic shock. The FDA originally required that the drug be dispensed only in certain healthcare settings, such as a clinic or hospital. Not seeing a medical professional rules out a timely diagnosis of ectopic pregnancy or of an incomplete abortion, both of which can be life-threatening. But the FDA has removed the requirement that a woman be examined in person when receiving a prescription for chemical abortion drugs. Women are now getting abortion pills by mail. Samantha Flom, senior investigative researcher for Restoration News, writes of an abortion crime wave. Certain online providers, she says, will ship abortion pills to any state, even those with near-total abortion bans. Ms. Flom points to the chief offender, Aid Access, which only requires that users fill out an online form to receive its pills. Users sign to certify the pills are for their personal use, but no effort is made to verify the recipient is even female, much less pregnant. Lawsuits involving coercive drug-induced abortions, even one for capital murder, have been filed in Texas, Louisiana, and other states that ban abortion. If the FDA cannot ban mifepristone, it should at least restore in-person restrictions. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the other articles I put up here is the House committee finds Bill and Hillary Clinton in contempt. And in case you are not familiar with that, I actually watched where the vote took place because I thought, okay, how many Democrats are going to vote for this? And the vote was 34-8, with 9 Democrats voting in contempt for President Clinton. The vote for the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was 28-15, but still 3 Democrats voting in favor. So even as I was watching that pop up, I could realize, okay, we are not just seeing Republicans voting for a contempt charge against President Clinton and Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton. There were Democrats that were, which I thought was kind of interesting because this article by Andrew McCarthy points out there was significant Democratic support for citing both Clintons. Democrats are preparing to go scorched earth against President Trump and his subordinates the moment they regain control of the congressional chamber, because, again, impeachment and all that. And so they were not out of whatever sentimental attachment they have to the Clintons. They still may have been willing to create a precedent allowing former presidents and top executive officials to actually be held accountable. And this really kind of gets into, there's a real bet right now about how long Attorney General Pam Bondi will stay in office, because there are just a lot of people that have been saying, where are the investigations? Where are the prosecutions? People lying to Congress. And it seems like if we even have investigations, they're massive hearings and nobody ever gets charged. Nobody ever gets convicted. Nobody ever goes to jail. And yet, again, a lot of this has to do simply with the whole issue of the Jeffrey Epstein files, which I think, frankly, were mishandled as well. But what about this? This might at least be a possibility possibility that not only now that you have the committee voting it out of committee, but I suspect the House of Representatives will hold a previous president, Bill Clinton, and his wife, Hillary Clinton, in contempt.
Yeah, well, if people weren't already convinced that the Clintons are kind of has-beens, then they should be now. I know we'll talk later about, the cause of the left. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Trump made much ado of the Epstein files, and I think maybe came to regret it. But I think a lot of Americans really cared about that. And I think, both left and right constituencies. And obviously, they are going to want to go after Trump on this as soon as they're able to. So, yeah, I think that this is a winning issue for the American voter.
Yeah, and I think this is important because it's an important opportunity, certainly for the Republicans in the House, and they need to be consistent with this. And the message is this: no one is above the law, right?
We've been hearing that for all the time.
Whether you're a former president,
yes,
a former United States senator, secretary of state. I mean, I've actually been served and had to comply with the subpoena by a governmental entity. Now,
I watched it.
and I mean, did I want to do that? No, but I believe in the rule of law, right? I mean, I guess I could have gone to Canada, or I could have done what the Clintons did, just ignore it. Well, of course, that's not. I mean, a subpoena, there are procedures in which if you object to it, then you can file your objections. And you can have those objections ruled upon. You can actually go to a federal court and get protection. Instead, what Bill Clinton did was he asked for an extension for rescheduling his deposition and then still doesn't comply. He was just buying more and more time.
Yes.
And so, I mean, again, no one is above the law. And the Clintons aren't above the law, nor is anyone else. And so yeah, throw the book at them. They should be held in contempt. DOJ should prosecute them. And if Pam Bondi won't do it, then we should get a new attorney general who will do it. And the concern is, I mean, the clock, and I know another article we're going to talk about in a little bit is the midterms.
Oh boy, yeah.
There may not be a Republican majority come next year, and so if they're going to do it, they've got to do it now. But which also says, and sort of thing is, well, why won't you? I mean, I responded to my subpoena because I had nothing to hide. I was willing to tell the truth. I was willing to be there. But, well, what are the Clintons? The people who don't want to testify, like the Clintons, what do they got to hide? and the truth is, if they've got something to hide and they think they're going to incriminate themselves, well, the Constitution gives them the opportunity to plead the Fifth Amendment. But we'll all know what that means if they do so.
By the way, what do they have to hide? Again, the name Peter Schweitzer should be good enough. I can mention his book, Clinton Cash, The Untold Story of how foreign governments benefit from them, and they benefit from them as well. And foreign governments and businesses have made them rich. And we've known that the Clinton Foundation worked very well, except when they weren't in office because they couldn't buy access. But again, there are some people, Liberty right now, that are just saying, okay, where's the prosecution of, first of all, the Jeffrey Epstein thing? That was just so mishandled, as evidenced by the fact that Dan Bongino finally said, I am out of here. What about Hunter Biden? What about the possibility of, even the other day at Davos, the president saying again, the 2020 elections were fraudulent and rigged. Okay, do the research, and then come to some conclusions. The on again, off again, whether or not we have the Epstein files. This is a little bit like the Keystone Cops, and we need better, I think.
Yeah, I think that's why, I do a lot of research, obviously, on younger generations. And I think this is part of why they're so cynical, because I think for a lot of people, they do feel like a certain class, a certain political class gets to be above the law.
That's right.
And they feel that promises are not kept. And even when there is an issue that is of big concern that everybody should be concerned about, that it just kind of goes away, or it doesn't matter, or once people get in a certain position, they're willing to ignore it or change their stance. And so I know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is quite a figure, but if I did some research on, her constituents in Georgia, and, they really liked the fact that she stuck by her guns on that issue, because they said a lot of people, they go to Washington, D.C., they say they're going to represent us on these things that we care about, and then they don't do it. And so they find somebody who says, I actually am going to keep talking about this, even if I lose political allies. Of course, there's a lot of things we could talk about with her, but people want to see that. And I think that's why institutional trust is at an all-time low.
And again, a lot of this gets back to the Epstein files themselves. And I thought this piece by Andrew McCarthy reminds us that, when Donald Trump was out of office, and of course, Joe Biden was, there were people talking about Epstein and the fact he was a pedophile and all the rest. And then all the so-called rabble-rousers, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino, suddenly found themselves in a position now they had to do something about it. And the argument that was made at the time is, well, let's have transparency, because just think about this for a minute. If there is anything linking Jeffrey Epstein to Donald Trump, don't you think the Biden administration would have surfaced that a long time ago? And more importantly, back to this issue of transparency. I don't care if it's the President of the United States. I don't care if it's certainly Bill Clinton, or certainly in this particular case, Donald Trump. I think we should get to the point where we really do feel like no one is above the law. And we were hearing that for some time with President Trump, or former President Trump, when he was running. And it should also apply to former President Bill Clinton.
Absolutely. And don't forget what's at stake here. I mean, these are children who were abused. I mean, they're described so often as young women, but at the end of the day, these were children who were abused and taken advantage of. Anyone who participated in it should be held accountable. And if the House is looking at it, then people should answer truthfully. And if he has something to hide, he should plead the fifth.
Again, that's an article we wanted you to read. It goes into some more detail, but it is on the website. Let's take a break. I'll take some phone calls when we come back after the break. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the articles we've posted here is by Karl Rove, and whenever it's Karl Rove, some things I agree with, sometimes I disagree with, and we do that just to stimulate the conversation. Is Trump trying to lose the midterms? And the first point he makes is that after actually closing the southern border, probably would have been appropriate for the president to have taken a victory lap, publicized that, talked about it, and really didn't, and then immediately went into, all the deportations and some of that issue. The other one he's talking about, which has to do with what has been unfolding over this last week, and that is every year you have elites from all over the world, and we're talking about globalist elites primarily that go to Davos, Switzerland, and as a result, they talk about how to begin to bring about this sort of one world economic structure, governmental structure, try to do what we can to advance the common interest of the entire globe. And it is something where you don't really expect too many Republican presidents to attend, and yet that's exactly what they did. And not only did you, of course, have Donald Trump there and speak, you had Howard Lutnick up there, and he was speaking. He is the Secretary of Commerce, and he was really kind of making some really strong points. And at the end, somebody booed him, and he looked over and figured out that the person that booed him was Al Gore. Remember Al Gore? You had Scott Bassett, and he's talking about the economy and some other issues as well, and all sorts of things that you've never seen before. But as you might have imagined, President Trump decided, and of course Karl Rove talks about that we really need Greenland. And you're just thinking, well, this is not going to happen, but never underestimate the power of Donald Trump, because at the end, he actually says we've got a deal on Greenland. And what he's done is move what we call the Overton window. That's an individual I wrote about in the past, where there are things that you can talk about, things you can't talk about. Liberals have moved the Overton window to talk about transgenderism and same-sex marriage and things of that nature. But Trump's moving the Overton window in a different way and saying, yes, we can say we need Greenland, and we can actually say that this is important. And I'm going to write a rather pointed letter to the Prime Minister Frederiksen of Denmark. I'm going to say to Mark Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO, that we need this for security reasons. And so as a result, at the end of the week, interesting enough, he says there's a deal in the works on Greenland. The tariffs are off the table at least for the moment. This might mean security, it might mean a golden dome, it might mean mineral rights. Liberty, never underestimate Donald Trump in making a deal.
Yeah, and the Next Generation Roundtable on Monday, we were all trying to make sense of this. And so it's come full circle. Now here we are on Friday, and we got a little bit of a resolution. So I think with, President Trump, people don't really know what's going to happen. And but they have seen that he does mean a lot of what he says. We've seen that with Iran. We've seen it with Venezuela. And so when he talked about getting Greenland at any cost, including a potential invasion, I think, people were legitimately and understandably concerned by that. However, he did put a lot of pressure and fire under the seats of those parties that he needed to cooperate with in order to get more access in Greenland. And so, again, it's like, did you mean it? Were you going to go there? Or was this just another pressure campaign where you're going to say, hey, well, then we're doing all these extreme things if you don't comply. And then people say, OK, we'll make a deal, but hey, here we are. And it seems like we're not going to be invading Greenland for now. So that's good.
Well, and again, I'll just come back to it. Monday, we had the Next Generation Roundtable. You and Chelsea, and one of your guests was just kind of like, well, what is this all about? And here...
I wasn't thinking about Greenland last week.
Yeah, and talk about moving what we call the Overton window. What is possible? And I suspect, I can't prove this, but I suspect that after he made his speech, he first talked about how we're for you in Europe, but we're very strong. The United States is very strong. We're for you, but, we're stronger than we've ever have been. And after hearing Mark Carney, who is the Prime Minister for Canada, just doom and gloom and everything else, and Mr. Optimism, Donald Trump, that sort of changed things. And then just said, we need this because we need it for security reasons, and that should be enough. And I suspect behind the scenes, he sat down there with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, and said, either this happens or we leave NATO. And after hearing, interestingly enough, Ursula von der Leyen up there saying, Europe is going to be independent. We want to be independent of America. And I'm thinking, how? You do not have the ability to defend yourself. You weren't even spending enough money to fund NATO. And now you're talking about being independent. You can pick up your toys and go home. But the bottom line is, I think Trump finally said, look, we are here to defend NATO. We are paying the very significant amount of this. And so we don't want the Prime Minister of Denmark to actually say you cannot have Greenland, even if we just have it as a territory, because there are too many things at stake and we can't trust Europe to defend us anymore.
Yeah, I think of it with Trump. It is, it's his book. It's The Art of the Deal.
It is. It's right out of the book.
And I mean,
like it or not, that's what you got.
These European leaders, I think, are somewhat sophisticated. They do not know how to deal with Trump. They completely don't. I think Carney maybe a little more so, but even then, I think he paved the way for what happened. And almost wondering if they were working in tandem, which I'm sure they weren't. But I think this is the art of the deal. Donald Trump's a negotiator. I think we've seen it on so many different. Whether it's tariffs, or Greenland. He's negotiating, and it's always a negotiating, and he's ever, and I think really good. It's ever changing. We so often will have this is a principle. This is my principled position. I'm not going to back off. I think Donald Trump has very few of those, and I think I think he plays by different rules, and so people can't. In diplomacy, they just don't understand that. They don't understand it. So I think he played the European leaders. Was it his goal ever to actually, Greenland to become the 51st state or one of our territories? I honestly don't think so. I think what we want is we wanted more presence there. We didn't want them messing with the European countries messing with us. And now he's paved the way to get what we really wanted, which is we want to be able to control that area so that we can have security, better security, and counter the Russians, counter the Chinese.
Again, this piece by Karl Rove, he says he thought it was a bad idea to go after Greenland. But the bottom line is that it's January. Liberty, when are the next elections? November.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, I think most Americans will have forgotten about it by then, unless they're just huge protests in Greenland. I think, 56,000 people live in the entire island. And if you want to understand that, we'll talk about this when we come back from the break. Get out, not a map, get out a globe, because I think people fail to understand how far north that is, and especially since there has been some warming, there are Arctic lanes now, and it puts us a lot more significantly able to protect ourselves and to protect Europe from Russia and other particular influences like China. But we'll come back and talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Ed Price writes about global economics and recently wrote to explain a mystery. After World War II, we assumed that we would have a vibrant international economy. When the Cold War ended, there seemed even more likely. Globalization would lead to a peaceful world and a stable economy. Instead, he says, we are seeing the stuff of diplomatic nightmares, international tensions, and competing territorial claims. There's an arms race in the South China Sea. There is ground war in Europe. He asks, what explains this mystery? Well, in 1970, President Nixon was forced by economic circumstances to no longer peg the dollar to gold. Thus, the U.S. adopted a fiat dollar, and this country had an unlimited money supply. He talks about the inflation of the 1970s all the way to the 2008 financial crisis and fiat finance wars in the Middle East. He does credit President Trump with one instinctive argument. If Uncle Sam buys foreign goods with his credit card, he will slowly destroy his credit score, erode his manufacturing base, and presumably lose his ability to fight a major war. This assessment is correct. For the last 50 years, this country has issued and exported paper currency. He notes that the French famously complained that this was an exorbitant privilege, but they and other nations know that it's really a burden to owning and operating an international financial system. He explains that the current system is undermining America. Ed Price ends his essay with this observation: there is no murder mystery here. It was Mr. Fiat in the drawing room with the printing press. We've solved the mystery. Now it's time to solve the problem. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, you've had really a division that has taken place and very visible oftentimes in places like Davos. Those who believe in a international world order or a new world order or a globalist order, whatever it might be, and those who believe in things like America first. And I think it was kind of interesting because Donald Trump also made it very clear at Davos that we are leaving the World Health Organization, the WHO. Now, technically, we already had because we weren't paying dues, but now we've formally left the World Health Organization. We are not buying into some of this globalist agenda that we've talked about so often here on Point of View. But Liberty, I wanted to come to you for just a minute because at the same time, he created the International Board of Peace, signed the charter for that, and ratified that, which is almost like in competition to the United Nations. What about this?
Yeah, I'm kind of interested. I think it was originally billed as kind of a administrative board to oversee the transition in Gaza and set up, some sort of government there. And then it has already moved far beyond that. In fact, I think France backed out of initially accepting the invitation because they saw that it was going to be setting its sights far beyond Gaza. Gaza is more of the launching pad for this. So it's going to be interesting. Trump has instituted himself as the inaugural chairman with no term limit, and he will choose the next chairman. So we'll see how long he serves as chairman. But
we'll see.
I tend to be cynical of, like you said, globalist, any sort of globalist sort of management, and to see how effective can that really be and how involved do we really want to be in that. However, Trump is a great negotiator, so maybe there could be some benefits to this working to create peace. Maybe keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's doing there, but it'll be something to watch.
I don't think he's Woodrow Wilson, but nevertheless, it was just an attempt to, in most cases, to get rid of that. I mean, again, you've got to understand that Europe right now is ready for central bank digital currency. And there was a presentation that one of the Trump administrations I think it was Scott Bessent, and the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, just walks out. I mean, they're just furious with the fact that they came and messed up their party. But we on this point at least say we don't want a central bank digital currency, and they were moving full speed ahead in Europe. And boy, if you want to be able to surveil everybody, we talked the other day with John Whitehead about the surveillance that is used in places like China, and now the surveillance being used in Europe. We don't want that coming to the United States.
No, and I think that's, my comments on Trump setting up this organization, it can't be worse than the UN. So that's a low bar. That's a low point, right? It can't be worse. And if it would cause us to divert I don't know the numbers. We used to know the numbers. The number that the U.S. contributes to the UN. Yes, I forgot that. It's a huge number. Anything to divert those funds away from an extremely ineffective organization, and that's an understatement. Then I'm for it. Although I'm very skeptical of anything like that actually succeeding. And again, I go back to what you just said. I just go back. Trump. It's Trump being Trump. You don't know. Does he really believe in it, or is he using this as another stick to get something else that he wants on the foreign scene? But certainly, where Europe is moving on so many levels is extremely anti-American. It's extremely anti-Christian, and therefore it's very troubling.
Mm-hmm.
And Europe is a mess. I mean, Europe is a mess, and it the more that it has issues like this, the more unstable Europe is, and that creates problems for the United States. And so, I think Trump, and more importantly, the administration, they understand that and navigating it. But he owned Davos, right? I mean, and you're right. They must have been. I mean,
you ruined our party.
I mean,
yes. I mean,
was
you brought
he
Howard
invited?
Lutnick
Was he invited, or he just shows up? I mean, it's Donald Trump. I mean, he's the uninvited guest showing up at your house, and then gives really an incredible speech. Considering what he was walking into and what the other leaders had said.
Well, and again, Howard Lutnick, at one point, everybody's all upset with him because he says, Europe, you're just crazy. You're building windmills. And first of all, those windmills are created where? China. Does China have any windmills? Of course, later on, Trump also points out, no, they don't have any windmills. And he says, now you have windmills, but nobody in Europe makes batteries. So you're even becoming more and more dependent on China. Well, there are people walking out when he's saying that. And then you've got, of course, the Secretary of Treasury that's talking about these various ideas and making fun of the California governor who shows up as well. Also, I don't know why the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas was there, gave a speech, but again, they can all gather together. But from start to finish, whether it is Donald Trump, whether it's Vice President J.D. Vance, whether it's Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Commerce, State Secretary of State, these people are all saying the same thing, and that is, Europe, you better get your act together, and we really don't think you are going to. You're going to become more and more irrelevant. And we have very significant threats from places like Russia and China and North Korea. We at least took care of Iran for a while, and this is a dangerous world, and you don't seem to be very serious about this, and that's an concern.
No, I think that's right, and the China issue is very interesting because we also know this past week that the Prime Minister of Canada appears to be cozying up to the Chinese.
That's the other aspect, yes.
And then I'm thinking, okay, is he trying to do a play out of the Trump playbook? So let's act like because Canada does not need to cozy up to the Chinese, but is he doing that to kind of put pressure on the United States to kind of leave some of the pressure off of Canada? I don't know, but I do worry. I mean, we can't have a Europe, and I think Trump's speech highlighted this, as you mentioned. We can't have a Europe that is allowing the Chinese more and more inroads. But the European government are so, they're so weakened now, and they're so desperate for investment that they're looking for, and if they're shying away American corporations, then they're on the verge. They could be on the verge of economic collapse, and that would truly impact America as well. I've heard some stories too about how American businessmen have been treated in Davos, and let's just say Americans are not right now. It's not a good time in Europe for American business people either. There's very much a cool reception. So it's very interesting, very very interesting time. What's going on, and Donald Trump's playing a game. He's won on Greenland. We'll see about other issues.
One of the other things they were talking about in terms of the speeches that some people have said, there were people that were booing and people were not reacting well to the Trump administration. And Gary Bauer had a good piece. He said, well, just imagine how they would react if it was Kamala Harris. Well, if you're a fellow globalist, you're going to get a standing ovation and all that. But if you're actually challenging globalism and the New World Order and elites, you're probably not going to get a rousing response. And it's been amazing to me to have, whether it's the president of the European Commission or whether it is the president of the European Central Bank, being upset about this, walking out Al Gore booing.
Those are good signs for the United States.
I think most of our listeners to Point of View would say, let's have more of this. Let's have Donald Trump and all of his team show up at Davos next year, because they were, in some respects, from their point of view, a skunk at the party. But nevertheless, that's what we had to deal with. Well, again, this also reminds us, and maybe when we come back from the break, we'll talk for a moment about the fact that we do have some midterms coming up, and we do want to talk about that. Got a piece by Ben Shapiro about the left's search for a new cause, which I think is also part of the midterms. And then before we're done, Penna Dexter has written a piece on the abortion crime rate wave. I would like to get some comments, obviously, from Liberty on that. But as we go to the break, you can, again, find many of the articles that we've been making available. Don't forget, still making available the copy of my booklet on a biblical view on gambling, in particular focusing on this new scandal of sports gambling. And if you would like to get a copy, that is the case. We also, of course, encourage you, if you have not signed up for the Pray for America subscription or even the Viewpoints commentary, we have all that available on our website at pointofview.net. Let's take a break, though. When we come back, Karl Rove is concerned about whether or not Republicans will retain control of the House. What might that mean? And what we could expect if indeed that takes place is one issue. And, of course, a new cause for the left. After a while, they've been searching for one, and Ben Shapiro thinks he's found what they are going to be using in these campaigns. We'll talk about that right after this.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, if you would like to read some of these articles, especially if indeed you are actually cabin bound because of the snow or ice. This piece by Karl Rove talks about the midterms. The one by Ben Shapiro we're going to talk about in just a minute also, I think, gives you some perspective. But again, we have in studio for this last half hour Jeff Mateer, Liberty McArtor, and I thought it would be good to mention the fact that historically, when a president is in power, his party loses ground and loses seats in the House and Senate. There are some exceptions, but those are the exceptions. There are all sorts of reasons why Karl Rove suggests that that indeed might be the case. And also there are some reasons to believe that as some of this plays itself out, if indeed the issue is affordability, maybe the increase in wages and a very dynamic economy would work in favor. If it goes the other direction, of course, that would, I think, then once again give us a House that is not run by the Republicans. Some other foreign policy issues, although people don't tend to vote on foreign policy issues. So if nothing else, Jeff, you and I have been around long enough to see the ebb and flow, but in many cases it has been a general truism that the president's party loses seats in those midterm elections.
No, and absolutely. Historically, it's only been a few times in the history of the nation where that hasn't occurred. And so you're going against headwinds. You know that everything equal means the Democrats are going to gain majorities in the House of Representatives and possibly the Senate. Now, the Senate, the advantage in the Senate is there aren't many vulnerable seats. And so it would really take some very, very, a disaster, a catastrophe for the Democrats to gain control of the Senate. The House, that's not so. And obviously, that was one of the reasons I think that the Trump team was very interested in doing something that was not usual, which was the redistricting efforts. I mean, they were attempting to kind of bolster their ability to retain the House, and obviously that happened in Texas, but then it happened in California. So whatever was gained in Texas, it was taken away in California. But I think giving everything, knowing that if everything's just equal, there's going to be a loss. But I would go back to and I think on this issue he's exactly right. It's James Carville. It's about the economy, stupid, and it in the end elections certainly in the modern era are won and lost in the election. And so Donald Trump can have success in Europe. He can have success in Iran and Venezuela and be great on foreign policy, but at the end of the day, it's pocketbooks. And I think Joe Biden didn't understand that. And gosh, I hate to agree with Karl Rove on any issue, but occasionally he, the blind squirrel finds some acorns. And Karl Rove on this issue, I think he's right that. The question is right. Is Trump trying to lose the midterms? I think I disagree with some of the analysis.
Yeah, of course.
Other than I do believe the economy. I think the economy is what matters. I think that's what matters to working Americans. I think for the people who look, the hardcore Trump people, MAGA's going to vote for Trump. If eggs are $20, he'll convince them that it's not his fault, it's someone else's fault. So MAGA is going to vote for Trump, but that's not where this election is going to be won or lost. It's going to be in middle America, and it's going to be those people who did vote for Trump because of Biden's ineffective handling of the economy. And the question is, it's the classic Donald, are you better off today than you were? And for a lot of Americans, I think there are some good signs. But Trump needs to, the guy who's Mr. PR needs to have some PR about his economic successes, not about his getting bases in Greenland.
Well, and again, I think this is an important issue because the female vote is going to be important. And Liberty, you've certainly been watching that because there are two aspects. The moms, I think, as long as the economy isn't bad, are okay. The single women are going to be a different issue. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that, as Trump talks about, well, the stock market is at an all-time high, and gold is at an all-time high, and silver is an all-time high. And that's what I call a K-shaped economy. Mm-hmm. If you have assets, you're doing very well. But on the other hand, if the price of gasoline is under $2, and for many people it's under $3, sorry for those of you in California, but for many people, and it isn't as expensive to go to the grocery store, I think that also wins over some of those voters.
Yeah, that's really what makes a difference. And I think it was actually a Ben Shapiro show that I was listening to where he was making this point very well. Like, you can have some bigger wins in the economy, bringing interest rates down, things like that. How often do people buy a house, though?
Yeah. And
so they may not really feel that, but they're going to feel when they go to the grocery store every week, when they fill up their gas tank every few days. So those are the issues. And I think, Jeff, you're completely right. Just to put numbers on it, when you look at the core, 70% of core Republicans are definitely going to support Republicans in the midterms, they say, but only 56% of those who were newer voters, to Trump in 2024 say that they definitely will, because those are the swing voters who maybe weren't traditional Republicans, voted for Biden or Obama before, but they swung toward Trump in 2024. So where are they going to swing now? And I think, it's going to come down to affordability. That's the big buzzword.
Well, and I look at, excuse me, Kerby, think of Virginia. So Virginia was our first test because Virginia has the gubernatorial election on an off year. And of course, the Democrats won big in Virginia, very big after the Republicans had regained. And there was talk. Well, Virginia is Virginia blue? Is it purple or is it red? And I think it's purple leaning blue, and exceptional Republicans can do well. But what happened in Virginia? So Virginia runs a lieutenant governor, not a bad candidate, probably not the best candidate, but not a bad candidate. But Donald Trump didn't go to Virginia to campaign, because either he didn't think it would be effective, or the Winsome Sears campaign didn't think it would be effective. That's concerning, because a lot of what's going to decide the House are going to be a lot of congressional districts that look a lot like Virginia. Because most it's going to be because he's going to. Look. The hardcore Republicans, Rockwell County is going to go Republican, right? Collin County, they're going to go Republican, but it's those bluish kind of that went for Trump, are working class people who supported Donald Trump, but this time they're going to go look at and think, what has he done on inflation? How's he doing on interest rates? Now, some of those things, I actually think he's not doing bad, but he's not talking about it. And his PR machine, they aren't talking. He needs to talk about his economic success. Now, the good is, this is we're recording January 23rd, right?
Yeah.
So we've got some time until the midterms to talk about it. And so maybe this has been the foreign. He's done his foreign, and now we're going to concentrate on America and see things right.
And I might just mention, even when he was Davos, he talked about capping interest rates at 10%, which I think is going to have a negative impact long term, but short term might make people feel good. As Liberty points out, the whole idea of preventing some of these major corporations from buying homes and turning them into rental property might help a few people, but I don't know if they're paying attention to it. But part of it gets into the economy. So let me take a phone call or two just to illustrate that. Kathy out there in California, KNLB. I think you want to talk about how to maybe turn the economy around. So go for it.
Yeah, right at this point, with people, and the inflation was caused by everybody being out of work in Obama's time. Then it became a big issue when Trump got in and COVID. And the thing is, other nations played a part in that. China's aggression and Venezuela and Russia, they've been sending out ghost ships, and which is playing out right now in the Middle East. In this whole thing with Ayatollah Khomeini. And the thing is, though, has anybody heard about the Peace Council that Trump is trying to get?
Yes, we did talk about that. I'm just going to, since we're coming to a break, she's talking about the ghost ships, and that's the other thing. If all of a sudden we begin to pick up oil from Venezuela and some of those ships that were going to Russia, boy, the price of gasoline goes down. But it isn't just that, because that's what also affects the groceries that are coming to your grocery store and things of that nature. So he's always had that argument, drill, baby, drill. And I do believe that could be a very significant stimulus for the economy. And all of that might just crash on the shore of America in the summer and in the fall. And I think it could have an impact on the economy as well as on the midterm elections. But we need to take a break. And Kathy, I appreciate your comments, but we're coming to a break and we'll come back. And I haven't even talked about one other aspect that Ben Shapiro brings up. So we'll talk about that and a commentary by Penna Dexter right after this.
Post-Roe v. Wade, abortion numbers have increased. Although some states prohibit it outright, chemical abortions take place in every state. Well before the justices handed down their 2022 Dobbs ruling freeing us from Roe's federal right to abortion, the Food and Drug Administration made abortion easier to obtain and more dangerous. Abortion drugs first became legal in the U.S. in 2000. That's the year the FDA approved the two-drug regimen to be used during the first 7 weeks of pregnancy. In 2016, the agency approved an extension, allowing allowing chemical abortion up to 10 weeks gestation. The first drug in the two-step regimen, mifepristone, blocks the hormone progesterone, causing the baby's death. Mifepristone can have serious side effects, including hemorrhaging, immune system inhibition, and septic shock. The FDA originally required that the drug be dispensed only in certain healthcare settings, such as a clinic or hospital. Not seeing a medical professional rules out a timely diagnosis of ectopic pregnancy or of an incomplete abortion, both of which can be life-threatening. But the FDA has removed the requirement that a woman be examined in person when receiving a prescription for chemical abortion drugs. Women are now getting abortion pills by mail. Samantha Flom, senior investigative researcher for Restoration News, writes of an abortion crime wave. Certain online providers, she says, will ship abortion pills to any state, even those with near-total abortion bans. Ms. Flom points to the chief offender, Aid Access, which only requires that users fill out an online form to receive its pills. Users sign to certify the pills are for their personal use, but no effort is made to verify the recipient is even female, much less pregnant. Lawsuits involving coercive drug-induced abortions, even one for capital murder, have been filed in Texas, Louisiana, and other states that ban abortion. If the FDA cannot ban mifepristone, it should at least restore in-person restrictions. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, let me just mention that one of the columns I've mentioned, and we probably won't get into today, but maybe we'll cover it more next week. But it's a piece by Ben Shapiro in which he points out that after the Civil Rights Act and after the Civil Rights particular protest and some of the great success there, that was something that certainly provided, as he said, the Democratic Party an opportunity to have a moral authority. And ever since then, Democratic Party has been searching around for others. He immediately goes to the issue of gender, and certainly that was the case, the issue of homosexuality, transgender, and some of that, trying to, if you will, say that anything having to do with gender was something that's tied to the civil rights movement. But he's arguing now that the new cause is illegal immigration, and as much as you find yourself saying, seriously, you have Eric Holder, former Attorney General under Barack Obama, saying that the Trump administration is pursuing unprecedented mid-decade gerrymander attempts in a concerted effort to segregate America and try to pull out again the Jim Crow arguments. Don't know how much that will work, but again, there is a lot of, as you can see in the Karl Rove piece, resistance to this issue of deportation and ICE. But if that's the only issue that you're going to be running on, we're against Trump and we're against ICE, usually people tend to want to vote for what they're for. And right now, the Democratic Party is real good at talking about what they're against. I don't think that works.
Yeah, I think it's a great folly to try to squeeze every issue into a civil rights framework. That was a very unique issue and situation in American history. But I think it again goes back to something we've talked about a lot, that the feeling that you need to frame things in terms of victims and oppressors. And so they're looking for the new victim class or the victim class that's going to motivate people this election. And I think eventually people kind of see through that. And it's not that those aren't issues we should talk about, but framing it that way over and over again, people get tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they pick that issue because that could assure some Republican success. I mean, the issue that I think is a winner for them, and that they could really, and it's really back to the what we would think is the roots of the Democratic Party. It's be the party of the working class.
That's right.
Talk about affordability. Talk about care and compassion. Talk about I mean, that to me, that's as a Republican, that's what I fear, because I think that is as long they want to talk about immigration and and all that. What I fear about is talking about affordability.
Yeah. Transgenderism and gender studies and all that. I just don't think that resonates with the American people. One other issue, and that's bringing us to, of course, first of all, this piece by Penna Dexter, The Abortion Crime Wave, and also this very good booklet that we've talked about before that Liberty's put together on chemical abortion. They will try to certainly make the abortion issue sometimes in certain states and certain locales an issue. So what about this? Penn is talking about, again, the abortion numbers have increased, but also talking about the fact that we have more and more women who are abortion-minded going to chemical abortion rather than to an abortion clinic.
Yeah, so just for a little history, and you can get this if you request the booklet, when the mifepristone, the abortion pill, was approved by the FDA in 2000, it was approved with a lot of conditions. It was only approved for the first 7 or 8 weeks of pregnancy, and you had to have an in-person visit with a doctor because it could be very dangerous taken outside of that time frame. They have to make sure you're not having an ectopic pregnancy. They have to confirm how far along you are, and all those are very hard things to determine, as a woman. And then they extended it to 10 weeks. Then during COVID, they removed those conditions so that people could get it via telehealth, saying, well, it's because of COVID. And then they never put those restrictions back in place, of course, because that was the goal all along. So now, fast forward, you have a situation where and Penna points this out in her commentary, there's a company, you can literally fill out a form online. They don't verify that you're a woman. They don't verify that you're pregnant. And you can get these pills mailed to you. When I interviewed an advocate for Real Options, which is a pregnancy center right here in the Dallas area, they said they had a young woman come in to their clinic who had been mailed 13 abortion pills and taken them. That is so bad for you. And then you are having doctors, or not even doctors, mail pills to people who live in states that have outlawed abortion after the Dobbs decision. And you have coercion taking place, boyfriends and partners or traffickers ordering these pills because there's no verification. And you have documented cases. I know ADF is defending women in this issue right now who were coerced to take abortion pills. Last week when I watched, this is the last thing I'll say, I watched a Senate hearing where they were talking about these dangers, and one of the Democratic senators said, that's not what it's about. We know that women have been coerced into having abortions for a long time. Okay, so we're okay with it happening with the abortion pill? Just the dismissal of it really shocked me. But it really is a crime wave, and women are being harmed, not to mention, of course, the unborn lives being lost.
Yeah, great.
Oh, that was the same hearing that the witness would not say that men can't have children. But so,
a lot of things came out of that.
You get what it's worth.
I was just going to mention real quickly, because I did want to get some other comments. This booklet is available, but the simplest way is if you just go to the website, pointofview.net, type in chemical abortion booklet. I just did. We have the booklet that you can download as a PDF. So we'd be glad to mail you one. But if you say, well, I'd like to read that right now, that is the case. Penna Dexter's commentary is the one we've posted here today, called The Abortion Crime Wave. But it illustrates, again, I think, just sort of the callousness, certainly, Jeff, as well as just the inability to actually focus on basic biology. Yeah. And you come out of these hearings saying, are you guys living in an alternative universe? What's going on?
Yeah, and because they know they've got issues, so let's just ignore the issue and not answer questions. I mean, I think this is the most important issue in the pro-life movement today. Is how do we tackle the abortion, chemical abortion? How do we tackle that issue? Because it's causing the pro-life groups to really rethink strategies, because it's no longer about reaching a woman outside an abortion clinic. The abortion clinics, we don't need abortion clinics. You can do it in the privacy of your home. You don't have to ever see a doctor, as Liberty mentioned. It's through the mail. So how do pregnancy resource centers now reach these women? And with Google, I mean, that's one, they're searching, but now with ChatGPT, and it's a game changer in the pro-life movement. And that's why, we know is since Dobbs, there are more abortions, right? There are more abortions since the Dobbs decision. Now, obviously, you could argue, well, there have been even more had there not been a Dobbs. But But abortion is today, it's easier to get an abortion today than at any time in our history. And it's because of chemical abortion. So it's a real challenge. It's a real
think
challenge.
so. Well, again, I'll mention the booklet, and Liberty, thank you for writing it. And again, if you would like to get extra copies of these, I've said before, every pregnancy resource center in the country probably needs these. But again, we can give you a chance to get it on PDF. And most importantly, Penna Dexter's commentary today is on the abortion crime wave. Mine today is on the whole issue of fiat currency, which maybe we'll cover next week. But we started the program by talking about the weather, and I certainly encourage all of you to stay warm, stay safe. 4 years ago, we had 250 people in the state of Texas die, and one of those was a neighbor I knew. And so be safe, do what you can to keep safe, but most importantly, enjoy the weekend. And I want to thank again all those who've been involved in this program. I hope you'll enjoy the weekend. See you back here on Monday, right here on Point of View.
It almost seems like we live in a different world from many people in positions of authority. They say men can be women and women men. People are prosecuted differently or not at all, depending on their politics. Criminals are more valued and rewarded than law-abiding citizens. It's so overwhelming, so demoralizing. You feel like giving up. But we can't. We shouldn't. We must not. As Winston Churchill said to Britain in the darkest days of World War II, never give in. Never give in. Never, 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 never yield to force. Never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And that's what we say to you today. This is not a time to give in, but to step up and join Point of View in providing clarity in the chaos. We can't do it alone, but together, with God's help, we will overcome the darkness. Invest in biblical clarity today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.